Okay, good evening. It's about 8:37, 8:40 or so on Wednesday, September 25th, 2018. I'm going to review for you creating a user. I am going to very soon, in a few minutes, I guess, update the instructions file for creating the RPS program. I'm giving a lot more detailed instructions. In that, I'm going to ask that we create a user. So let me go over how to create a user. And then I'm going to show you a file that I created, and it'll be better explained in the Word document. So let's create a user from the Object Explorer. Okay, I'm going to connect database engine. I'm going to connect using Windows authentication. This will connect me as the system administrator. From the system administrators, I go to the security tab and the logins, new login. I'm going to give this login SQL Server authentication, and I'm going to give it a password, a good password. I'm going to not enforce password expiration, and then I'll give it the login name. And my login name that I gave mine was this: public user. Okay, maybe I had an underscore in there or so, but anyway, when I click OK, he's going to be created, and he's going to go to the master database. So I'm going to click cancel, and boom. Okay, I have an underscore in mine. Here's my public user. So fill in the login name, public user, SQL Server authentication, enforce policy. Now, at first, your default database will be the master database. I'm going to have to give this public user a database. I recommend that you go to database, new database, and you create the database RPS_DB. Mine already exists. See if I can. RPS_DB already exists for me. But all you would have to do is click here, click on the heading, click new database, and you're just going to type in RPS_DB and then make the owner yourself. That's important. Make you be the owner. This is where you're going to put your RPS stuff. So at the beginning of all of your RPS scripts, it will say use RPS_DB. Since I already have it. Now you go back to your user, that public user that you just created, and you're going to go to his or her properties, and under the default database, you're going to make that be RPSDB. I think I had something different in there. So the public user's default database is the RPS database. And that's really the only thing you have to set. Now that RPS database has to exist. So the user has to exist before you can set the database. And then anyway, a little chicken or the egg problem there. It says we have to come back to it. I guess we could have created the database first and then the user. Okay, one more thing. Now this database, I'm going to open this database, right click and go to properties of the database, and excuse me, right click and go to the properties of the user, and we'll go to, on the right up here, we go to user mapping. And I want the user to be, I want you to click the RPSDB if it isn't already clicked. It might be already clicked because that's the default database. So under user mapping, under the users, let's go back over that. I stumbled there a minute. I'm going to right-click the user, go to the properties. Under the user mapping over here, user mapping, I want to make sure that RPSDB is checked. Okay, and down here in the roles, he is public. He doesn't have any other roles except public. So he's just a public user of the database. Then say OK. Now, we're done here. So I can go ahead and log out as the SA. Close this. Over here, I connect with SQL Server. My user's public user. You can make his password the same as yours. Connect as the public user. Now over here, I'm the public user. Okay, this is my test routine. So this is test RPS. So this is the code that tests my RPS code. I'm calling a procedure here that says RPS init. That's the one that wipes everything out. You'll see it in the documentation. This is an error, the error message that is returned, 0 is successful. I'm going to execute some code here that I wrote over there, and I've documented what it is. So I'm going to execute RPS insert player, and I will try to get that up for you here in an hour or so, such that you have it right at your fingertips. And so when you so I'm going to execute all these things, and when they print, they should print a 0, because 0 says everything's fine. Now this guy cannot see any of these tables here. So RPS, now these are bad data. These are some tests where I try to put in a null primary key. This one is okay, but then I try to do the same one again, and so the primary key is already there. Here's one that a game does not exist, and you'll see that stuff. And that sort of thing. We should not be able to select from RPS players, because as the public user, I should not be able to see. Now it says query execute. Oh, that's public. Okay. I should not be able to select from the table. That's a view. I should not be able to select from the table. If I try to select from the table, I get, sorry, you can't see the table. So I can't see the table players, games, or rounds, but I can see these are views, and it will let me select from the views because I gave him permission, and you'll see that documented well in the file. Like I say, I should get that file up right away. Now, if I execute this, because I have, as the public user, I have the privilege to execute this procedure. So if I start executing, I should get these procedures. I'm just going to execute the whole file, kaboom. I don't know. Execute RPS rounds. Line 5. Cannot find the object. Maybe I need to go back over here quickly, and I'm going to run through these guys and create everything. So let me go open, create the tables, execute. Oh, I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, I'm back to the recording. I had to go fix something in the code there. This code, I am connected as the public user, the one I just created. Now, I don't have any rights at all to the database. So, for example, I cannot see the table RPS players. And so when I try to execute that I just get an error message that says, you can't, there's no such table. You don't have permission to do this. So you're connected to the database, but you can't access that. But what I can do is I can execute these procedures, and you'll see how I get those rights given to me by the owner or the programmer of this procedure. The owner of this procedure gave me the right to execute it. So I'm just going to execute all of these now in one swell foop. I say execute, and what happens is that it goes in and executes this RPS init, which essentially wipes out all the data in the program. Then it executes insert a player, and it prints player, and it gives us back the error level. Now, if I go down here and I look at the output, all of these guys, the player, and then I insert some games. The games come back with a 0 and the error level, and I insert a couple of rounds, and they come back with 0. So everything is correct up here when I insert these guys. All of these are correct, bouncer and Al. So I'm inserting players. Slasher's name is Bob, Basher's name is Joe, Smasher's name is Tom, and so on. When we get to the game, now Basher and Bouncer are in a game, Slasher and Bouncer are in a game, Smasher and Slasher have a game, and so on. So these are creating games, and then these are just inserting some rounds. And the round with Basher and Bouncer gets R and P, rock and paper. Now these are bad data down here. Cannot have a null primary key. This one is okay. The first one is okay, but the second one is the same primary key again. The second one will fail with a higher level error message coming back. ERR will come back higher. Let's see, I don't believe this one exists. I don't think Bouncer and Slasher have a game. Well, they do. Slasher and Bouncer have a game. What's the problem there? Goes with the two. Okay, I'm trying to insert a game that already exists. Trying to insert a game, Bouncer and Bouncer, they can't be the same. I'm trying to insert a game with one of them being null. Looks like the same error. Trying to insert a round that has an invalid player. Trying to insert a round with an invalid choice. So X is not one, it's RP or S. So when I execute this guy, so I'm going to execute this code, execute, and let's go look at what we got. Well, it'd be best if I didn't have anything selected. Execute. Notice at the beginning, I get all zeros, so I'm returning 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. That means there were no errors. Now, when we get down here to the errors, you get rounds. Now, this particular one was okay, and then the next one after it was invalid because I tried to insert the same one twice. And these are error returns values, and that's the idea here is that our procedures catch the errors. The idea here is this is public user. Public user is not allowed to touch the tables. So if public user tries to touch the tables, public user gets his hand slapped. He can't do it. He gets an error message. Not allowed. Any of these. But public RPS players is a view, and this view I have given him the right to execute, so he can see the names of the users, but he can't see the user, the date, or the real name of the user. He gets to see the games that are in place, but he doesn't get to see anything else, not the game ID or the date. And finally, this public user gets to see some things about the rounds. They're it's not inserting the rounds yet because I'm still working on that trigger. You cannot delete. Okay, this user would not be allowed to delete because it's denied. And this user would not be allowed to insert directly in because he can't even see the tables. So he doesn't even know that a table exists in most platforms. And that's the whole idea here, is we create a public user and then we log in as that public user, and we should be able to execute our code, thereby working with our game. And I will try to get that file uploaded right away. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Ending the recording.